Hello. Hello. Welcome to Leap Taken. I am Mika. Here at Leap Taken, I talk all things witchy, craft related, law of attraction, manifesting esoteric, and everything else in between. Welcome to the channel. Today, we're going to talk about how to build a spiritual practice after religious trauma. This is a topic I think a lot of people have talked about this, but I want to, try to add a little more to it than maybe what you've heard in the past. It kind of broaden the topic out a little bit, but I don't just want to talk about religious trauma. I want to talk about, hey, and ski building the your spiritual practice. We're going to explore beyond that. I'm trying to turn this phone down because inevitably it will ring. I'm in demand. But seriously, no, I want to talk about the spiritual practice side of it as well. So again, welcome. Um, I hold a lot of care and compassion for this topic, by the way. So this is like a very serious topic for a lot of us. Whether you're raised or you were raised in a controlling religious household, told your curiosity was a sin, or made to feel small in the presence of the divine. This is going to be a topic for you. This is a space for you right now. So, I want to talk about reclaiming your spiritual voice, your sacredness, your freedom to connect to the divine on your own terms. So, let's talk about what is religious trauma. It's not just church hurt or bad memories. Let's just be clear. It's a rupture of your spiritual autonomy. There's a lot of people I personally have experienced in conversations when people are talking, when they hear religious trauma, they do equate it to and I don't say simply like I'm minimizing it, but they just think church hurt. This is kind of dangerous when you are talking to people still in the church and you start interchangeably saying these things because they really think you mean like church hurt, and they're not hearing you. And this could be like your mom, your aunties, your sister, whoever you're talking to, and they're just not going to hear you if you're minimizing it to only just church hurt, and you have real trauma associated with it because yeah, I'll continue. So again, it happens when a person or institution or doctrine inserts fear, shame, or control into the relationship with the divine. This was something I experienced, and it started very early for me. The indoctrination typically starts, we don't see it that way because the people in your life, usually your parents or your mother, father, whoever, or grandmom, they genuinely thinking they're saving your soul. So you're dealing with that. They think they're saving your soul, so they don't see it as a brainwashing literally that's taking place. But because of that, there was so much I didn't understand about myself as a teenager, and I had so much shame around my body, interact like feeling attracted, sexually attracted to somebody, wanting to act on that sexual attraction. There was a lot of shame with that. That a lot of people think that's just, oh, whatever, you just get past it. A fun fact: a lot of women or people in general, well, men and women don't get past it. It just looks different. But I'm a woman. I'm going to speak from my point of view. Um, it's really if you never work through that shame and you stay, because if you stay in that religion and you stay within that and you're still holding on to that, there's this idea that, well, when you get married, especially amongst our community, I black churches only know about that. But when they talk about, oh, well, when you're with your husband, you can explore, you can do all these things. But then there's another group of people, religious folk, who are like, but not too much now, because you still got to be godly. You still got, you got to be basically, you can't be freaky. You can only be so freaky. And it's like, well, how do I know? And what if you got a freaky dude and he asks you to do, like, it was always so much. So anyway, there's a lot of shame around a lot of things. Um, and the control aspect was also another part of my personal trauma of God's in control. You're told God's in control, but these things are not just happening to you, they're happening to people you know, bad things, things that, can never be reversed. And, how do you just tell me that God's in control? So he wants this, and then, well, we don't question God's will or what he's doing. I was told that. Personally, I was told that. So that sort of thing, like, when you're a young person and you're going through life events and your friends and your peers, like, I remember coming out of high school, like, we had just graduated, it was like over the summer. Someone died that we went to high school with. And it wasn't about being very close to this person. I saw this person Monday through Friday. I was aware of who they were. I've had dialogue with this person before. We went on our senior trip. I remember this guy, like, and he died. And that kind of really messed with my head, like, a lot. And I didn't know how to process that because I couldn't understand why he had to die. And I think he died, if I understood correctly, it was like from sickness. Like, it wasn't, he got sick. And that just didn't sit right with me. And with the concept of God being in control. And not working through that really brought on a lot of trauma. But I want to talk about some common signs of religious trauma. Fear of punishment. That was me with the shame and the sexual stuff as well. Fear of punishment when trying something new. But in this case, if there are people afraid to burn sage. They're afraid to burn herbs or light a candle because it might be, especially in these times, they think that it might be perceived by their God or their religion, I don't know, to be witchcraft, and that scares them. Guilt around pleasure. That was also my deal. Sexual, emotional, or spiritual. Have you seen people who the sexual thing is easy, but I think that's why you have a lot of people, if you notice, in those like cult-like Christian groups, like the Duggars, the 10 kids, 11, 20 kids and counting. I don't know what the show was. I don't even know how many kids they got up to. But anyway, like that type group, if you notice their extreme ideology around sex, they create these deviants. It does the opposite for a lot of people. And just so much guilt. But anyway, yeah, guilt around pleasure. Even emotional, it's like they can only have a good time if they somehow convert it into Christianity. So like if there's music being played, it doesn't have to be like, it could be just like somebody playing something on a piano and it's pleasurable, like they pull back. I personally have seen stuff like that. Even though they're feeling something. Oh, good example. I heard or watched videos of some people. I skipped past because I don't want to keep hearing it. But there were people who identified as Christians. They said they saw the movie Sinners. And I don't know, it's something in my spirit. And it's like you felt that. I know they were talking about the scene with the music and the different dancing through the ages and all of that. And they said it made them feel something. And they knew what they had to leave because they knew that was demonic. And I just found that interesting. So you did feel something spiritual. You felt something spiritual. You felt that connection. Almost all of us did at that scene. Unless you have major blockages, you felt something. Even if it's for a split second, something in your heart, in your spirit kind of rose up a little bit. It was pleasurable, by the way, to feel that. It was a unseen force. They felt very guilty, so they had to leave a theater over it, like that type thing. But that's a common sign of religious trauma. Spiritual freeze response, so feeling numb when trying to connect. That's another thing. A very religious person being taken to a concert, they struggle. They feel it, but they don't want to feel it. It's almost primal. We're meant to feel the beat, the bass, the drums, the music. Like it's in us to feel. That's like a human thing, by the way. But they're trying to block it because it's Hypervigilance when doing divination or ancestral work. Ooh, child. Enough said about that. That's hypervigilance. Yeah. Shame for exploring other spiritual paths. And this is somebody who maybe they have the trauma, they're not actively participating, but they're struggling. I want to go back to the spiritual freeze response as well. I have also noticed this people who, this is from my coven, from the inception of starting it, of coming across all different types of people, and the ones who are who clearly to me exhibited having religious trauma, whether they recognize that's what it was or not, that's what I saw it to be. They wanted this desire to connect and to connect to witchcraft, for it to feel real to them. And it was always like this battle I could see with some people on doing that, and they would constantly keep going back to, like, they were back and forth to church and things like that, because they were seeking this connection, and they didn't deal with the trauma first. They're not recognizing that's what it is. But again, about the hypervigilance when doing divination ancestral work, let's talk about that, because that one's I'm seeing a lot of that. It's where, oh, because my ancestors, if I didn't do, that's why I got into the car accident, because I didn't listen to them. See, they told me not to do XYZ, and then I got in an accident. And it's like, so you think your ancestors made you get into a car accident because you didn't follow? Okay. And that's what you see. That was your take. Okay. Around divination, like they take everything so literal. With divination, like very literal. It is tough being somebody who is a reader and you're working with people like that. Like, once I kind of pick up on it, I'm very intentional about how I'm delivering the messages. Because I realize there's no room, like they're gonna do exactly it, and it's like, well, hold on, things can change. This could be a message about, if you continue a certain path, this may happen. It doesn't mean that's going to happen. Let's talk about all the other energies around the cards, and what I'm also intuiting for you, because I think it might be this, but it's hard to reach people like that. I give them grace, because I honestly, I was there once upon a time, so I get it. Another sign is shame for, again, I said shame for exploring other spiritual paths. This is something I definitely see with those who have come out. Maybe it's been some time, but they haven't dealt with the trauma of religion, and they go into, like, folk practices like hoodoo, and they're carrying a lot of that with them. And the thing that kind of helps with the shame is they go heavy with the Bible stuff. They're still, they feel like they have the best of both worlds. I feel like those people, when I see those people, that's what I literally think. That's how they're putting a salve over the feelings of shame of exploring anything outside of Christianity, and they will fight you about it. They will fight hard about it. The more I see, like, that aggression coming on the subject, I know that's what it's about. Inner conflict when enjoying witchcraft or learning about deities. And that's something I had to deal with. I'm going to tell you where my issue was. And this is way back when, many years ago. We're talking, I hate to admit, it's almost 2 decades ago. I remember learning about the concept of the horned god, and I started with Wicca. So, in the imagery, kind of, I would have a little freak out moment inside my spirit a little bit every time. My heart would race a little bit, because what does the horned god look like? It looked like the devil character. So the conflict with that, like, I really had to figure out how to work through that. That was really hard for me. I hated it. And I didn't like that about myself at the time, because I was like, it's been years since I was doing anything with Christianity. So I couldn't understand why I was still holding on to this stuff, but I had to work through it. So religious trauma isn't limited to one religion, by the way. It affects people across cultures, faiths. Many witches are rebuilding from that place. So I don't want to be, I was Christian, so I'm going to speak from that. But we could say the same about other religions as well, just to be clear. It's not just Christianity. Now I want to talk about rebuilding trust in yourself. This was definitely beneficial for me. So after being told you were wrong for being, trusting yourself again is revolutionary. And this I'm going to attach to what I know, because being told you were born in sin is like you're already wrong. Like, that's wild. Anyway, that does something to your psyche as well. Seeing yourself as someone who always has the potential to be wicked, or seeing yourself as someone, um, you can only do well, like any effort you put into your life, any goals that you've reached, you have to not take full credit, even though it was you all along. I once upon a time I was somebody who thought that. Anyway, let's talk about rebuilding. So start with gentle grounding. Breath work is amazing. Please don't underestimate it. But deep breaths, or soft lighting, things like that. Honestly, crystals help as well if you can. If you're not there yet, I get it. But maybe have a crystal in your hand. But start with gentle grounding. We're building trust in ourselves. So honor your body's wisdom. So when it says not yet, listen. When it says yes, trust it. For me, back to the horn god example, I wasn't ready to deal with the whole concept of deities and all that sort of stuff after spending so much time doing some other work to get away from this all-powerful, all-knowing deity, and always feeling so much shame and fear and all that sort of stuff. So I wasn't ready to deal with the concept of a deity. I wasn't ready to embrace that anytime soon, let alone, honestly, ancestor veneration. I kicked that can very far down the road for the longest. That made sense for me before I dealt with that. I did try a couple things, and I didn't really, like I said, I didn't feel a connection either, talking about from the earlier examples. But I did listen gratefully, and I didn't try to force it. Well, it was impossible to force it. It just felt performative. I wasn't feeling anything for the longest time. So I chose not to work with a deity at all because nothing was resonating. The other thing is practice non-performative spirituality. So you can light a candle just because, with no intention and no pressure. This is for those who, if you are dipping into witchcraft and you're not sure you're doing everything right, something I had an obsession with, thinking, am I doing it right? I got this in my head, and it wouldn't let up for the longest time. I'm not doing it right. But anyway, because, I had came from something where there's a whole book and there's a bunch of reverends and people, and everybody says they know the way, and they're telling you for sure this is what it is. So there is a right or wrong way from what I came from. So, coming into this, I kind of was still taking some of that into this. Like, there's a right or wrong way I should be approaching this. But anyway, this is something is still a very important part of my practice to this day. I'll light a candle just because. At some point, I may have put intentions into that candle. Other times, I do have candles. I just want to light them. Of course, there's candles I want to light for the scent, for the ambiance. But, like, seriously, like, from a spiritual perspective, it's just, I'm not doing a whole thing. I'm just lighting it. And let it speak for itself, I guess. That's like low-level spiritual stuff that I do for myself as well. Write in your magical record keeping in your journal without worrying about being deep. Okay? I'm going to be doing another video of it soon before the end of the month, again about Book of Shadows, but a little bit more personalized, talking about it. And one of the things that I have struggled with is the wanting it to be deeper, I think. I don't know. I got all these ideas in my head. So this is why I'm talking to you about it, because I think a lot of people are like me. Like, you want it to reflect so much of this deeper meaning. And I realized everything doesn't have to be that deep. I just write things, I record things because maybe it was just interesting to me at that time from a spiritual perspective. It doesn't have to be deep. It could just be interesting, or it brought me pleasure to just look at that symbol or that picture or something like that, and I'll put it in I'll record it. That's it. Another thing, a non-performative practice of your spirituality is prayers. If you're comfortable with that, say prayers or speak out loud, even if you don't know who's listening yet. Some of us like the aspect of prayer and saying them. You don't have to say, to a specific deity. You could just speaking out. Now, we know, if you've been practicing for a while, your spirit guides hear you. The universe is listening. Your ancestors are listening. It's okay if you're not. I was somebody like that. It's okay if you're not ready to deal with that yet and address it head on. That is perfectly acceptable. You don't have to. But if you still feel comfortable with the prayers and speaking out loud, do so. And I again, it's still part of my practice. I realized I've been doing this when I was working on my notes. I have my notes here. That's something I kept doing. I still just speak things out loud. If it's a day and I just feel overwhelmed or something like that, or if I'm bursting at the seams with so much gratitude because so many things are going my way, I'll say something about it out loud to the universe. I don't directly necessarily say it to a specific entity or being. I guess that's my prayer. Okay, so understand that not doing anything is still sacred when done mindfully. So allow spiritual practices to feel weird, awkward, or emotional. That's also your healing too. So I want to talk about reclaiming sacredness. Reclaiming sacredness on your own terms. So you define sacred now, not a book, not a preacher, not me. Sacredness can be simply combing your hair, doing your hair with intention. I have locks. I interlock my locks. So when I'm going through and I'm interlocking, that is also a ritual. It is spiritual for me as well, because of the intention that I put behind it. It's an act of love magic for me. It's practicing that. It's love for me. It's self-care. There's so many other components into it. And I have ritualized the practice. It takes it from being a chore, a pain in the butt, because I don't know how many locks I have, but it takes hours to do it. So I have to block out a lot of time. So I ritualize it. I know what I'm going to have to drink. I know I'm going to take a little something. That kind of makes me hyper focus a little bit. When I'm doing it, I'm watching something maybe that it expands my mind a little bit. And also my thoughts are pretty clear. I don't want to talk negative. I don't want to have any kind of negative conversations. Yeah, I get it's a lot of other parts around it as well. Sacredness can also be cooking for yourself and adding herbs with love. You don't have to know all the bits, and I'm not asking you to buy anything or do something different. The oregano, the Italian mix, that's your prosperity. The Italian blend or something like that. Bringing more prosperity into your life. Something simple like that. Excuse me. Taking a nap during the hottest part of the day. This is coming definitely from my world. Taking a nap during the hottest part of the day can be a sacred activity, especially if you're doing dream work. If you add more intention to it, and that's loud. If you're trying to, connect with your ancestors or whatever it is, or you want your spirits to kind of come to you. So yeah, taking that nap also is an act of self-care or self-love. Sacredness is laughing without guilt. That might not hit some of us, but for some of us that makes sense. Laughing without guilt. That's kind of in there with the pleasure thing. Reclaim rituals that were once fear-based. This was something I had to do. So when I talked about prayer, spell work. Prayer is becoming your spell work. Communion becomes shared meals or offerings. Anointing, oil rituals, or your glamour magic. See? The prayer thing was easier for me to digest as far as like equating that to spell work. That made a lot of sense to me. I was able to work with that. The communion, I already had a lot of questions around communion anyway. When I was active, I had a lot of questions, so it wasn't that big of a deal with me with that. But the offerings, I had a lot of questions about offerings in the beginning too. I'm just saying I had a lot of questions about a lot of things, and I just kind of just when I had a lot of questions, I couldn't find answers. I just would just pause and just not do it until it made sense. I'll just say that. And it took years, honestly, for the offerings to make more sense to me. That was how my mind worked. The anointing, well, that definitely was something. I mean, I was very accustomed to, having oil put on my forehead or something like that, or put on a door, the doorway or something like that. I was accustomed to that, so that made sense for me as far as like working with the oils that I made and anointing myself and anointing, doorways and things like that. That made sense. Now, referencing that in glamour magic was another thing, like adorning and anointing with glamour magic. Once I kind of saw the how they equated, that made even more sense to me, especially like getting ready for a ritual or things like that. I think the first time I can tell you I made that connection was belting. I wanted to participate. It was a solitary practice for me at the time, and I didn't have anybody. I didn't have any friends at the time I was working with or anything like that. So I was just creating something on my own. But preparing for my Beltane ritual, adorning myself, doing that. And I did my ritual. I waited till everybody else went to bed. So I did it that night because I just wanted to just have time for myself. And I was down, like everybody was upstairs asleep. And I set up the living room. I set everything up and I set myself up. And I realized what I was doing. Well, now I can tell you that was definitely glamour magic. I was doing stuff ahead of time to prepare for the ritual, but anointing myself. Another thing is explore deity or spirit connection with choice and consent. We're talking about reclaiming sacredness on your own terms. So explore deity or spirit connection with choice and consent. This is something I probably need to just like do a whole separate thing about one day. Choice and consent. I truly believe that there are, again, and I can tell these are people who didn't deal with a religious trauma. They truly believe this, the example I gave, like your ancestors, you didn't follow whatever, you divined that they said or the message and they're punishing you. That's not a consensual relationship if you feel like that's fear-based, and people take the religion and they bring it into that practice of ancestor veneration. And when you hear people talking like that, they really do believe that as well. And my heart breaks for them because that's not what ancestor veneration is about. It's not about this relationship dynamic where you're constantly being scolded and you're a child and you're gonna do as I say. That's that Abrahamic stuff, and you're bringing that into ancestor veneration. And listen, there are people who are older elders who they very much take this approach, and they have been teaching others this. I see that, and I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything, but if you come over here, this is not what I do. This is not what I teach. This is not what I advocate because it's not true. These are people who have been damaged by religion. And maybe they can't undo it. I'm a spoiler. I don't think everybody's going to be able to undo all of that trauma from religion. I don't. I don't think they can. Just being some people, they don't have the capacity, and I respect it, and it's not an insult to say it. It's observation. It's obvious they're not going to be able to undo decades of religious dogma and trauma and all that sort of stuff. They don't even. The first step of trying to resolve the issue is identifying there's an issue, and they don't think there's an issue. They think that's how it works, and it's self-fulfilling once you start thinking like that. But you don't have much of a choice if you're constantly thinking you're going to be punished, right? And as far as consent, if I call you, if I petition, then you're working in my life. If I didn't call for you, if I didn't petition for you, I don't believe Apollo is working in my life. Well, I'm not petitioning Apollo. I'm not working with Apollo. Why would Apollo be working in my life? That's not happening. I have I believe Oshun walks with me. I haven't been initiated, but I do believe she walks with me. So I'm very, notice I'm using certain language. I'm being very respectful. I don't believe that she is a main character, so to speak, in all the aspects of my life. If I petition her, I believe she may consider my petition. I don't believe she'll necessarily answer it every time. I believe she'll consider. I have that much. That's where my faith goes. She'll consider, and we'll see. But it's consensual. I don't believe there's this force constantly putting hands in my business. You see what I'm saying? I don't believe that at all. It took a lot for me to get here, by the way. You can say no. You can walk away. That's sacred too. I want to talk about also if you are working with energies, we're just going to say energy, spirit, what have you, and it feels overwhelming. There are things happening. You're seeing evidence of them working and doing things, and it's overwhelming, and it's making you afraid. You can make it stop. You don't have to continue. That's not part of it. That doesn't mean that's not this isn't the movies. This is not your quest. I don't think we're meant here to suffer. Sometimes suffering happens. I don't think that's the whole point. I don't think we're on our life, in the span of our life, is one big test to get to the afterlife. I don't believe that. I think this is a unique experience that we get to experience, and depending on your vessel, meaning if you're able to have full body autonomy, you can move about and do things, do it. If you're not, maybe you express it differently, but I think we're here for the experience of being here. I think that's the point. Maybe that's not enough for some people, and I know for people coming from a religious background, that's really hard conceptually, and then coming into witchcraft or something like that. That's a hard thing to do with your mind. You might not ever see it quite that way. Some of us, I recently was talking about this. I part of me believes in the chaos there's some sort of divine purpose. There is that helps me to rest and to sleep at night. But there's another part of me that believes it's just chaos, and it's all happenstance, and it just depends on where you land. I wonder about that, and I think sometimes that's true. Maybe not all the time, but I think sometimes that's true as well. Joy is sacred. Pleasure is sacred. Curiosity is sacred. Joy. I been really kind of focusing on this and wanting to talk more about that because in June I'm going to transition. I'm going to have a whole thing of topics that I'm talking about. I've already set my plans. I'm quite excited about it. I'm calling it a Hot Witch Summer. Joy and pleasure are very integral part of this. I want to celebrate more. I want more joy. I feel like I live a joyful life. I try to my best to create my backdrop so that it sparks even more joy, but it actually starts internally with me as well. And I don't want to constantly be dealing with sacrifice and suffering. I don't want to constantly think that I have to go through these trials and tribulations um, to get to some afterlife experience, and then it'll all make sense, and I'll know it all then. No, I that doesn't that's not, I don't want that practice. Joy is a sacred practice to me. Joy is everything from I made myself an old fashioned yesterday. Um, I don't drink that very often, so it was a special little treat for me. And I decided to have a bunch of different foods that were pretty like finger foods, like basically apps for dinner. So, and I put so much intention on this and what it would be. And there were different flavors and different profiles, different, from different cultures. So, I wanted to have, like, I had something Italian, I had something Indian, something kind of more Southern black food. So, I did all of that and, had my fun drink, and uh, it was just joyful for me. The practice itself, it was such a joyful experience doing that. And there was something very sacred about that. I was in my very comfortable clothing and I had my lights in the living room, and I'm sitting down and I'm sort of holding court. I got my sister on FaceTime, and my daughter's over here, and we're all talking, and it just felt wonderful for just a regular Tuesday night. It was just joyful. And the pleasure of, the flavors and stuff like that, there was so much intention. I thought so much about this meal of just, appetizers for dinner. But, it's those little things like that. Waking up this morning, I thought about this. I was like, I'm so grateful that I wake up when I want. Like, when I naturally am ready to wake up, I wake up. And the pleasure in that. Oh my gosh, I remember so many times of having to be on somebody else's schedule. I'm so grateful, and there is so pleasurable to just stretch and kind of just wake up on my own accord. I love that for me. And curiosity. Oh my gosh, I'm always curious. I think you should always try to be learning something new. There's no such thing of knowing everything. Even if you know a lot, there might be a reinterpretation of what you know. I'm open to that. And there's something sacred about that, especially in spirituality. And I'm constantly re-examining my thoughts on my worldviews, on culture, on all of it. One of the things I talked about is working with a deity. That was a big stopgap for me for most of my witchcraft practice. I didn't work with anything because honestly I didn't want to, and I had a hard time. I felt like I was playing make believe. Felt like it was all just made up. I was making it. Yeah, I was just making it up in my head. That's what I felt. So I just didn't. But I became so curious over time. And then that curiosity led into other things. And I realized I didn't have to make things up in my head. This is not something I have to make happen. It was just happening. I was just having the experience, which I knew in my heart was how it was supposed to go. But like I was saying before, I wasn't ready. So it didn't make any sense. So, I couldn't make something happen. But that curiosity brought this channel about as well. Now that I think about it, because I felt like I had a lot to share, but I knew I was still wanting to learn, and I wanted to share that. I wanted to share that here on this channel, so that made sense. Witchcraft gave me the permission I believe religion denied me, to choose to feel and to be powerful. Power. I wanted to feel powerful. Hi, Sunflower and Thistle. I wanted to feel powerful. In the religion that I came from, The power was coming from the deity. Um, the way that the religious folk talked around me, what I always heard, like people would down themselves um, in glory of, the deity. Oh, I'm just a humble, servant to the the deity. You know, even in the music, calling yourself a wretch, like, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, um, who's that Dave Ramsey guy? He has this thing many years ago. I was into him for a minute. And he still says it, I think. It's like, how's your day going? Better than I deserve. What? You- this is just normal talk to people. Um, it makes complete sense to them, and I understand. I used to be in it. It makes complete sense to talk like this. I'm like, from a witch who understands words have meaning and spells, you're constantly putting yourself down to elevate something that's supposed to already be elevated. And this is just normal speak amongst these people. And you teach your children that, and they grow up and they continue, and life is lifing. And it doesn't explain all the other intricacies of life. But, anyway, but the power, I wanted to recognize my own innate power. Witchcraft gave me that. And this is where you go into like manifesting and things like that. I understood that my outlook, my attitude, my worldview um, affected so much, and I did have some control here. I did have some power. Um, if I could think it, if I could dream it, it's a possibility. If I could insert myself into this at the time, just a dream, I started to realize, wait, I could really make this happen. This is how you get into spell work. Um, but it does start with being able to even conceptualize whatever that result is that you're desiring, that you want to happen. Conceptualizing it is possible. Coming with religious trauma, that is kind of a more difficult thing you think it is, because you're still peeling, you got to peel back those layers of not feeling worthy, and also claiming you're powerful. More powerful than what is what, you might ask yourself, because you're coming from that background where the deity is the all powerful. You don't have any power. You don't have power. You just have free will. You don't get power. You get free will. Well, okay. Well, free will's not getting me anywhere. I would like some power, please. um, no, I wanted to exact power over my life. And when I say power, please understand, I'm not talking about in the movies, like lights coming out my hands and I'm making things happen and moving things with my mind. Honestly, just power over my life, having over my spirituality, over seeing myself, really seeing myself as, and not through a lens of, qualifiers of making sure I don't, boast too much about myself, or making sure I don't get too high on myself and thinking I know more. Releasing all that type of, negative thinking and all that sort of stuff. Witchcraft helped with that a lot. Witchcraft also helped me with the biggest thing. I've kind of been, and this, we're going to wrap up with this, but this is one of the things that I was very afraid of dying, which was pointless because we're all going to die. But I was terrified of dying. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm looking forward to it, but, I wouldn't say aging. Aging represent death. So I had some negative views around death, which I think there's a lot of people walking around now. I think it's like the younger adults, they have an issue with aging. Like, to be 40 is the worst thing ever. Shit, well, shoot, they got a problem with you being 25. But I digress. The issue is not so much I had an issue with aging. Aging represented dying. I knew that the more you aged, inevitably you would die. So it wasn't even just about me. I was afraid for my mom. If I noticed her acting old or something like that, it always kind of, I didn't say it that way, but that's what it was. I was deeply afraid of death. Um, I would have almost near anxiety, like I would have essentially panic attacks if I let myself think too far about the idea of me dying. And this started when I was a little girl, and this had everything to do with religion, by the way. But what they thought was positive talk about going to heaven or hell, I was so anxious about these topics. It terrified me. I talked before. I was obsessed with the book Revelations, the book of Revelations, because you're telling me that's the end, and I was so terrified. Like, I hear people talk about when I hear people talk about their fear about the rapture and things like that, I get it. I was terrified about this sort of stuff, and none of the adults in my life, in my opinion, had the capacity to understand what that was doing to me. I also wonder if they had their own anxiety around it as well. But the last thing they were going to do is talk to a little kid about it. So if they're not dealing with their own, they definitely want to going to deal with mine. And I didn't have the language to articulate that as a child. But that just kept going, and I just got older, and eventually I had children, and I had these like really deep fears about death. And the more I got into witchcraft, the more I understood working with spirits, the more I honestly eventually got into working with ancestors. I didn't do ancestor veneration for a good part of my practice as well, out of ignorance and fear. And also, remember, I thought I was making it all up. It felt fake. So I didn't do it because it felt, I didn't push myself, and I'm glad I didn't, because it felt performative and fake. And who am I performing it for? Me? Like this, it did not feel natural, so I didn't do it until it made sense for me to do it. Doing that though, like taking my time through this practice and being open to questioning myself and being okay with feeling afraid sometimes, I eventually got through this intense fear so I can talk about death without my heart racing anymore. The most what I if we're talking about death, like for my love, like my mom, my family, of course I feel sad thinking that. It's more of the grief comes into play. I just get really sad thinking about it, but it's not that fear that I used to feel that would make my heart race, and I thought I was, about to pass out or die from it. Like, it was very intense for me. People who knew me back then, like my best friend at the time, she's aware it was very irrational the way I approached it. I'm glad I needed to deal with it. Either I was going to have to talk to a therapist, and in my case, it was witchcraft to work through it. Rituals, to get more specific about how rituals help. Spirit communication, more divination. Who's talking to me? Who's talking to me? I asked myself, well, who's talking to you? Because my fear was death was just the end. Because once I gotten away from, here's the problem, the trauma. I had the religion, and they're telling me heaven, hell. Those are your options. Once I spent, I'm an adult now. I'm no longer believe any of this. I was kind of basically an atheist for a bit. And then I eventually got into witchcraft. So that's why it was hard for me to deal with the deity, because I'm coming from actually at this point technically being an atheist. But I hadn't dealt with a religious trauma technically. So now I'm coming into this spiritual thing again, and not really fully dealing, because I didn't know how to deal with it, to be honest with you. I had to kind of contend with this stuff that I didn't even think was a problem, and it was coming up. But yeah, rituals, divination, asking myself, who are you talking to? And being willing to be honest with myself on, well, you don't think you're making this up. So who are you talking to? If you're calling out to your ancestors, do you think they're listening? So you pull these cards and you're kind of testing it out, and then things happen. Who are you talking to? So in the dreams that you're having that's coming, my thing is buzzing. In the dreams that you're having, right? and you feel like a spirit of sorts is talking to you and giving you a message, and then that manifests in your waking hours. Who was that? What was it? Where did it come from? I couldn't explain it as coincidence. Coming to terms with spirit communication, working, with divination, like I said, doing more rituals, and you're calling out to certain energies, and you feel like they answered, over time, help resolve the deep seated fears that I had around death and dying. Uh, but that was witchcraft for me. And that also helped with the power thing that I was talking about, because now I felt more confident, which was more power. And then that was how I was able to get better as far as like with casting spells and more divinatory work and things like that, because I needed, that was like a huge, actually, out of everything in my practice, that was the biggest hurdle I had to get through from religious trauma, is death, dealing with death. I am so grateful, because that, I mean, I'm just getting older. With having that on me is, would not have been helpful. And I'm at the age now where, people I grew up with, they're going to start dying. If they didn't take care of themselves, they're going to start dying. And I see it with like the men, people, or not even people I necessarily grew up with personally, but like you see in the news, celebrities, things like that. And it's like, oh, I remember that guy, I really liked him. He used to do this, do that, and you might have seen a show or something like that. And they're like 50 and dead, or like 48. And I'm seeing men like that because they didn't take care of themselves. Or sometimes they got sick, but a lot of times it was preventable. It was lifestyle choices. Because you don't need to be dying unless, like I said, there's some, the big C, or, something else. Most of us, if you're going to the doctors and you're, catching things, you should be able to detect it. Modern medicine has come a long way. We're living a lot longer, unless you're not, seeing doctors. And we know men have a thing of not doing that. There is somebody I grew up with, and I found out, we're the same age, and she died, and I know she had a hard life. But my point is, I'm getting to that point where people I know are dying, and it's tough. I watch my mom, the people she grew up with, like there's funerals. She says, I don't want to keep going to funerals. And my mom's in her late 60s, but she's known people that were a few years older than her, so they're in her 70s. It's tough. If you don't have a handle on things, it's even tougher. I do have a question. What's one sacred thing you've reclaimed in your spiritual practice? What's one sacred thing you've reclaimed in your spiritual practice? Let me know in the comments. Another thing is, what would your spiritual practice look like if it were rooted in love instead of fear? So I wanted to take that away. Let that be a takeaway. If your spiritual practice was rooted in love instead of fear, or maybe it was at one point. So what does that even look like? If you would like to share in the comments, let me know. But this is something for you to reflect on. I do want to give I'm going to change to the channel. So right now, I typically come on live on Wednesdays for kind of like a sit down talk like now. And then I do Fridays, which you review. So I've been wanting to mix things up, and I thought with the summer it would be fun. So I'm going to do what I call, it's going to be on a Sunday. So I'm going to do a Sunday deep dive. So it'll be one topic, 1 hour. It's different from here because I feel like I kind of go out into different things, and I'm like, but we're going to talk very deeply, a deep dive on one topic, and it'll be for 1 hour. So it starts this Sunday. So the deep dive, sex, pleasure, and power in witchcraft. That'll be my deep dive. I'm going to take a step further into this topic, how sensuality and power can be spiritual acts of reclamation. Yeah, I can get that word right. Reclamation. So anyway, so yeah, I'm going to add that, as well. spoil, and I'm going to go into deeper topics about this, but June, again, I'm going to do kind of a theme for June that I really want to get into called Hot Witch Summer. I was inspired by, I saw something Practical Magic Summer, and then of course, Meg, our, living goddess with her Hot Girl Summer. So it made me think about that, and I kind of want to talk about those, it's going to be a whole theme around that for the month of June, just heads up. Um, I also want to share some affirmations. I'm big on affirmations if you don't know. So um, if these might help you depending on the topic. I released the voices that told me I wasn't worthy of divinity. My path is sacred because I walk it. I am the altar. I am the offering. I am the divine. I'm going to repeat these. I release the voices that told me I wasn't worthy of divinity. My path is sacred because I walk it. I am the altar. I am the offering. I am the divine. Okay. So thank you for coming, Insky. I appreciate you, Sunflower and Thistle. And if you're catching this on a replay, I appreciate you as well. Like the video, subscribe. In the description, I have a bunch of details, including where you can buy my Book of Shadows. They're available in a TikTok shop, but that's the Hoodoo Grimoire, the Book of Shadows for the Love Witch, and the Book of Shadows for the Hearth Witch. They're also available at my website. There's no shipping fee there. You don't have to pay for shipping at leaptaken.com. And you can also purchase them on Amazon. Again, the links are in the description. Hit the join button. You can join Leap Taken membership. It's like a Patreon here. I appreciate you. There are perks like deep discounts, plus they get member only videos, by the way. Also, did you know I do monthly moon readings? Go over to leaptaken.com. It's right there on the first page. Monthly moon readings are tarot oracle readings that are around the new moon and the full moon and some major astrological events. And they get delivered to your email. They're custom for you. So you'll get these readings. So check that out as well. If you want to join a subscription, it's $12.99 a month. It's nothing crazy. Yeah. And don't forget, I have a second YouTube channel, Magical Lifestyle of a Cottage Witch. It's more vlog style over there, where you get to kind of see the Cottage Witch experience as well. So thank you all. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. I'll be back with a witchy review on Friday. It'll be fun. And then Sunday with the new Sunday deep dive. One topic, 1 hour, a total deep dive. We're going to go deep. And let me know in the comments if there's topics that you'd like for me to discuss for that new segment that I'll be doing. I'll be very interested in what you might, if you really kind of wanted a deep dive on a specific topic, spiritual, witchcraft, something akin to that, let me know. A good chat as usual. Oh, thanks. I have friends who have worked through their religious trauma spheres, so this gives me some insight on what they could have wrestled with. Yeah, it's deep, and and here's the thing: for some of us, we don't even know. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what's going to come out until you're presented with something, and you get all these feelings come up, and you don't know why. Yeah, like why did I go to a concert and immediately have an emotional experience? It didn't make sense, but once I kind of peel back the layers and question myself, it had everything to do with spirituality. So yeah, just fun fact. All right, so I thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Bye.